Today's lesson is From Ancient Egypt to Hollywood, The Long, Strange History of Wigs. Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're talking about wigs, which is a piece of hair that goes on top of your head and you wear it for various reasons. Now, me, of course, as I'm getting older, I'm getting more and more bald, so I might consider wearing what we call a toupee.
Ooh.
That's what men wear. I would never do that, and I think nowadays lots of guys just shave all their hair off when they're going bald. I'm not quite to that point myself yet, but Mike, have you ever worn a wig or a toupee before?
Not when I'm not on stage or taking part in a Halloween party. So no, I'm not a big wig wearer. I used to have a wig at home, actually. I was playing in a rock and roll band, and we had a long-haired wig because we were playing music that style, that look kind of matched with. But apart from that, no, I'm not a big wig wearer. And I think like you, if I started to lose my hair as I get older, I might go full Michael Jordan and just start shaving all my hair off. But wigs, yes, are definitely an option. And of course, some people, because of health reasons, they might also choose to wear wigs. If your hair suddenly starts falling out because of an illness or something, that can be embarrassing, make you uncomfortable. So there's all sorts of reasons to wear wigs in the modern world. But also in the ancient world, there were all sorts of fashionable reasons to wear wigs. Back then, people wore very elaborate, large wigs, not because their hair was falling out, because that was just what you did. So let's find out about the very interesting history of wigs from ancient Egypt to Hollywood, even up to today. From ancient Egypt to Hollywood, the long, strange history of wigs. Wigs have been used for thousands of years for various purposes, including as fashion accessories, disguises, and even to cover up hair loss due to chemotherapy. With their ability to transform a person's appearance instantly, it's no wonder that they've remained popular for most of human history. Read on to learn more about the wonderful world of wigs.
大家好。第一部分介绍名词 accessory， 它的意思是配饰、饰品或是配件。例如 The scarf Scott wore was the perfect accessory to complement his outfit. Scott 所佩戴的围巾是个完美的饰品，和他的服装相互搭配。或者 A scarf can be a great accessory in winter. 围巾可以成为冬天的最佳配饰。再来看到名词 disguise， 表示用于伪装的东西，也可以是假装或是伪装。例如 The bank robber wore a disguise to hide his identity. 银行抢匪穿上伪装以隐藏他的身份。或是 Allie saw through her friend's poor disguise and recognized him immediately. Allie 看穿了朋友插进的伪装，并立刻认出他来。接着看到名词 chemotherapy， 它的意思是化疗。例如 Patients undergoing chemotherapy need a lot of support. 正在接受化疗的病人需要很多支持。再来介绍动词 transform， 表示改造、改变或是转换。我们可以说 The old warehouse was transformed into a trendy loft apartment. 那座旧仓库被改造成一间时下流行的复层公寓。又或者说 By exercising regularly, Claire slowly transformed her body over the course of a year. 透过经常运动 Claire 在一年当中慢慢改变了她的身形。
Okay, so let's talk about the first part of our lesson for today. Let's talk a little bit about the title first here. We're talking about a range of places where people wore wigs from ancient Egypt to Hollywood. So that's kind of like going to ancient times and bringing it up to the present. And if you see the word Hollywood, well, you know they're talking about Hollywood movies. And of course, actors and actresses will be wearing wigs in various productions. So we've got this long, strange history of wigs. I did want to mention that a wig here is countable. I'm going to wear a wig if you are planning to do that, whereas your hair itself is non-countable. I don't have very much hair, so I'm going to wear a wig, for example.
Absolutely. It says wigs have been used for thousands of years for various purposes, including as fashion accessories, disguises, and even to cover up hair loss due to chemotherapy. So there you go. Some very common reasons to be wearing a wig as a fashion accessory. Even today, if you go out to a nightclub on a Saturday night, you might see a good-looking young lady maybe wearing a pink wig or a purple wig or something like that. Their hair isn't normally that color. Maybe they work in a bank and they can't really have pink hair, but they just decide it makes them look cool. It makes them look very stylish and it matches their outfit, so they wear it as an accessory. An accessory is basically an item of kind of clothing, but not really clothing, something that you wear as decoration along with your clothing. So we often think of jewelry as an accessory, maybe a belt, your shoes, your purse, your handbag. These are often described as accessories. So not a shirt, a blouse, a dress, a skirt, pants, things like that, but the things you wear along with those things just to give a bit of style and color and personal flair to what you're wearing. So that's one reason to wear it. A disguise. I've never been on the run from the police, thank goodness, but if I was a spy, maybe trying to sneak into a country, if I was a criminal on the run, the police knew that I had red hair, I might try to find myself a black wig or something like that. A disguise is something you wear to cover up or to hide your identity so people can't look at you and go, hey, look, it's the bank robber. They might look at you and go, that's not the bank robber. The bank robber has red hair and that guy has blonde hair. So you could wear it as a disguise or even in a much more serious kind of way to cover up hair loss due to chemotherapy. This is a chemical therapy that people would get when they have cancer. So you would have these very powerful chemicals put into your body to try to kill off all the cancer cells or the tumor that might be making you ill or even threatening your life. But one of the side effects of this is that your hair can fall out and it can quickly fall out. And obviously people don't want to look sick. They don't want other people to treat them certain ways. Maybe they just don't want their head to be cold. So they might put on a wig when they're undergoing that very serious medical treatment.
Indeed, when my grandmother was having chemotherapy, she did not wear a wig. She wore a stocking cap. She was getting her chemotherapy treatments during the winter time.
Like a headscarf, you might wear that
Something
kind of thing
like
too,
that.
yeah.
Indeed, it does look kind of embarrassing if you're losing your hair because of chemotherapy, so they cover this up in various ways. And yes, you might wear a wig due to hair loss or because of chemotherapy. Now, with their ability to transform a person's appearance instantly, it's no wonder that they've remained popular for most of human history. So because they have this ability to transform your appearance, they have been very popular for many, many years. Now, if you transform something, you change something from something to something else, okay? So it can transform your appearance, okay? So if you're bald and you're embarrassed about that, you can wear a wig to transform your appearance into a person with a lot of hair. Maybe you can transform yourself to look like you're African or something like that with a big afro, and people will think you're actually from Africa as opposed to someplace else. And as you were mentioning earlier, Mike, you transformed your appearance from just a normal looking guy into a hippie when you wore a wig that had long hair and you could look like you were a member of the Grateful Dead or something like that.
That's right. I could bang my head and have all this wonderful long hair flying around, the long hair that wasn't mine. All right, so let's get back to it. So they have this ability to transform or change your appearance instantly right away. It's no wonder, it's no surprise that we are not surprised when you think about it, that they've remained popular for most of human history. People have been wearing wigs for a very long time. We'll find out exactly how long as we read on to learn more about the wonderful world of wigs. So let's do that. And we will first be going back to ancient Egypt. Even the ancients wore wigs. The earliest wigs we know of date back to around 3400 BC in ancient Egypt. Back then, only the rich and powerful wore wigs, making them a status symbol. In ancient Greece and Rome, meanwhile, wigs were mainly used in theater costumes or for the purposes of fashion.
第二部分看到名词 status， 它的意思是社会地位、身份，也可以是状态的意思。例如 Mark's work promotion raised not only his income, but also his social status. Mark 工作上的升迁不只增加了收入，还提升了他的社会地位。继续介绍名词 costume， 指的是表演或娱乐活动的服装、戏服。举例来说 I need to buy a costume for Pip's party tonight. 我需要买一套服装参加 Pip 今晚的派对。又或者说 For Halloween, Sharon wore a cat costume. 为了万圣节 ，Sharon 穿着猫的造型服装。
Okay, so here we have a smaller title for the second part of our lesson. It says, Even the ancients wore wigs. If you use the word ancient as a noun here, you're just talking about people who lived hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So yes, even they wore wigs. If we think about wigs, we might think that they're kind of a modern invention, that we didn't really have them or we haven't had them for very long. But no, people who lived thousands of years ago were actually wearing wigs. Let's talk about some examples here. It says the earliest wigs we know of date back to around 3,400 BC in ancient Egypt. When we think about old countries, we tend to think about Egypt and China and India. Well, if we're talking about Egypt, we're going way back to 3,400 BC, and there is evidence that people then wore wigs.
Very, very cool. Back then, only the rich and powerful wore wigs, making them a status symbol. So yeah, this has actually been true at different times of history. Wigs are quite expensive to make. I think back then you probably had to collect real human hair and kind of weave it into this natural looking headpiece, this kind of hair hat. And you can imagine that that would be quite expensive and time consuming to make. And they were a status symbol. Something that's a status symbol is a material thing, an object that you can buy, but it kind of shows you off in some kind of way, and it tells people a certain something about you. If you have a really big Swiss watch, if you drive a luxury Italian sports car or German car, if you travel first class and have fancy French luggage with your name carved into it in the beautiful leather. These are all status symbols, right? People buy luxury goods as a status symbol. They brag about traveling by helicopter or private jet or things like that. So when you hear that, you're like, oh, this person's important, this person's got money, that kind of thing. So you're kind of showing off to other people by having wonderful luxury goods and things like that. And back in the old days, luxury goods would have included a wig. And yeah, when you think about those carvings that we often see in the shows about the pyramids, right? The Cleopatra, people like that, they had that kind of square cut black hair. So that wasn't natural hair. That would have been a wig. Very interesting.
Right, so wigs were status symbols back then. Only the rich and famous could afford them. And in ancient Greece and Rome, meanwhile, wigs were mainly used in theater costumes or for the purposes of fashion. So we did talk about the example of wigs in ancient Egypt, but in ancient Greece and in ancient Rome, wigs probably weren't such status symbols. They were mainly used in theater, which refers to plays for performances, for entertainment purposes, and they were used in those costumes, or they were also used for purposes of fashion. So you did wear wigs in these two countries if you wanted to look your best, if you wanted to attract attention from people, and of course they were also used in costumes, which is a set of clothing that makes you look like a certain role that you're playing in a production. It could be in a film, it could be in a play. You could even wear a costume to a Halloween party because you want to dress up like maybe Buzz Lightyear or a ghost or something like that.
That's right. And some of the big festivals that the Romans had involved big social gatherings, parties. Dressing up was probably a part of one. I think their sort of Christmas in December called Saturnalia was a holiday where people would dress up. They would wear clothes that they wouldn't normally wear, and adding a wig, as anyone would know, to your Halloween costume just makes it that more interesting and hides your identity a little bit more effectively. So there you go. Romans did have wigs. Maybe they didn't wear them as frequently as the Egyptians did, but they were definitely part of society. So let's find out more about the later attitudes towards wigs and how, wigs suddenly became not so popular a few hundred years later. But wigs did fall out of fashion for a while. Wigs weren't very popular in Europe during the Middle Ages because the church condemned them, calling them badges of the devil. But as the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance and the church lost some of its power, wigs became popular once again as both status symbols and fashion statements. Queen Elizabeth I of England was largely responsible for this trend, since she used over 80 red wigs to hide her thinning hair.
第3部分看到动词 condemn 表示谴责或是责备，例如 The police chief issued a statement condemning the violent arrest. 警长发布一份声明，谴责暴力的逮捕过程。也可以说 The media condemned the baseball player for his racist comments. 媒体谴责这名棒球员种族歧视的言论。最后看到名词 Renaissance 表示文艺复兴或是文艺复兴时期。我们可以说 The Renaissance was a period of great cultural and artistic achievement. 文艺复兴是文化和艺术成就辉煌的时期。也可以说 The works of Renaissance artists have greatly influenced modern art. 文艺复兴艺术家的作品对现代艺术有很大的影响。
Okay, the third part here is a small title. It says, but wigs did fall out of fashion for a while. Now, if something falls out of fashion, it is no longer popular. I remember about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a fad for people wearing eyeglasses that did not have any lenses in them. But that particular fad has fallen out of fashion. You don't see people wearing those glasses anymore. It's no longer popular. So wigs at one time were not popular. They were not fashionable. They fell out of fashion.
Yeah, times changed, fashions, trends changed, and suddenly, being seen in a wig was not cool. In fact, it would have been the opposite, or it could have even gotten you in trouble. It says wigs weren't very popular in Europe during the Middle Ages, so a lot of time has passed, but during the Middle Ages, the time of knights and castles and things like that. In Europe, that's what we're thinking about here. They weren't very popular in Europe because the church condemned them, calling them badges of the devil. The church at that time, this would be the Roman Catholic Church based in Rome, Italy, they condemned them. They kind of damned the wigs. They said they are bad, they are evil, you should stay away from these things. Today, people might condemn drinking alcohol or using drugs or something like that, saying it's a social problem, it's bad for society, good people don't do this, setting up maybe not an actual legal law, but certainly turning public opinion against an issue or against a way of living your life. In this case, wearing wigs was seen as a bad thing by the church. They called them badges of the devil. So yeah, when you condemn something, you kind of say it's no longer acceptable, it's a bad thing, don't do it, or you will be a bad person because of your relationship to that or because of your doing that. And in this case, it is a badge or a sign of the devil. In the same way you might wear a badge or something that you pin to your clothing with the name of your favorite sports team on it or your favorite political group or your favorite musical group or something like that. It's like a public symbol where you show people what you believe or what lifestyle you follow. In this case, you're kind of saying, I'm on the devil's team if you're wearing a wig. I'm not quite sure why they were so anti-wig.
Well, maybe they thought that the devil was using wigs to cover up its horns or something like that. So it could be roaming freely in the world causing trouble. And if the devil wore a wig, it could hide itself. Maybe that's what they thought they were, symbols or badges of the devil.
The church then actually was against a lot of things, weren't they?
Yes, probably a pretty terrible time to be alive then. But in any case, here it goes on to say, but as the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance and the church lost some of its power, wigs became popular once again as both status symbols and fashion statements. So we have a period of European history called the Renaissance. I think I've heard people pronounce this as Renaissance as well, but the North American pronunciation is Renaissance. That's when there was a big change or revolution in art and culture and things like that, leaving the Middle Ages behind. So if something gives way to something, that means one thing goes away and something else takes its place. So the Renaissance took over, and then the church was no longer as powerful as it was during the Middle Ages, and things changed, so there was no one around, or at least the church was not as powerful, and they couldn't condemn wigs anymore, so they became popular once again, and they were status symbols, and they were also fashion statements. Of course, if you want to attract attention from people, you want to make a fashion statement by wearing something really catchy, really flashy to attract other people's attention, and it really catches their attention if it's something very expensive like a designer bag or something like that.
Exactly right. And also, like today, back then it was famous people, VIPs, celebrities who would often set the fashion trends. If these cool people are doing it, then we all should do it because then we'll kind of be cool like them. Maybe today it might be Kim Kardashian or something wearing wigs on Instagram that would get people wearing wigs. But back then it was Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I of England was largely responsible for this trend since she used over 80 red wigs to hide her thinning hair. So along with being the only surviving child of Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I was a very powerful queen of England, served for a long time, ruled for a long time, never married, never had children, but she was very well known and much loved in her country, and a lot of paintings were painted of her. And yeah, in almost every one that I can think of, she has red hair. Turns out that red hair was actually one of her 80 red wigs, and she used it in a fashion way, but also in a way of just sort of maintaining her dignity. She had thinning hair. I think she used makeup with a lot of mercury to like make her skin nice and white, because that was seen as another fashionable thing. But the mercury or the chemicals in her makeup made her hair fall out, and so that required all of these wigs. But because she was wearing wigs, other people wanted to wear wigs, and once other rich and powerful people wore wigs, the common people started to wear wigs, much as trends can be born and sort of spread around today.
And wigs are still with us today, and we'll continue talking about them in our next program, but we'll finish today's program by listening to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文一开始写到，数千年来假发一直被用于各种用途，包括时尚配饰、伪装，甚至用来遮盖因为化疗而导致的落发。文中它用到 cover up 来表达遮盖。那这边我们来介绍一下 cover up 的不同用法。好，第一个 cover up 它可以表达遮盖、覆盖，可以当及物或者是不及物用，像是 After taking some painkillers, he went back to bed and covered himself up with his blanket. 吃了一些止痛药之后，他回到床上并盖上毯子，也就是用毯子把自己盖起来这样子。好，那么第二个呢，我们可以用 cover up 来表达掩饰或者是隐瞒，它是当及物用。那么这时候后面常常会接负面的名词，像 crime 罪行、mistake 错误、problem 问题、scandal 丑闻等等。举例来说 ，When you make a mistake, don't try to cover it up or blame it on others. 当你犯错时，不要试图掩盖或怪罪到别人身上哦。好，那么接着读到课文第二部分，他提到我们所知最早的假发可追溯到西元前3400年左右的古埃及。文中他用 date back to around 3400 BC 去表达说可追溯到西元前3400年左右。那这边我们来整理一下 date back 的用法。第一种，我们可以用 date back to 去加过去的某个时期、年代或事件，像 date back to the 14th century 就是追溯到14世纪， date back to the French Revolution 就是追溯到法国大革命。第二个用法，我们可以用 date back 去加一段时间，像 date back 200 years 就是表达追溯到200年前，始于200年前的意思。好，顺便补充一下，动词 trace T-R-A-C-E trace 也可以表达追溯的意思，那可以当及物或不及物用。当及物用的话，我们可以用 trace something back to 去表达某事物，它可以回溯到，可以追溯到什么什么，那么后面就可以接时间啊、来源或是原因等等。它也常用被动语态来表示，那就可以用 something be traced back to 去表达某事物可追溯至什么什么。举例来说 The tradition can be traced back to the Middle Ages 这个传统可追溯至中世纪。好，那至于 trace 它当不及物用时 trace back to 意思就跟 date back to 一样，可以表达始于什么，追溯至什么。像刚刚例句也可以改写成 The tradition traces back to the Middle Ages。好，那么以上今天重点整理，我们就来回顾今天的单字吧。
Wig. Phil quickly placed his wig on his head before stepping onto the stage. Disguise. To escape the police, the criminal put on a disguise that included a fake beard. Transform. The old factory was transformed into a modern art museum. Status. Julian's recent promotion has significantly raised his status in the company. Costume. Cheryl just bought a clown costume to wear for Halloween. Condemn. Many teachers have condemned the cartoon for being a bad influence on children. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Mike.
I am Roger. See you next time.